Welcome to B2B Marketing Futures, the podcast for B2B marketers sponsored by Attribution, the B2B ad platform. Today, we are diving into one of the most debated topics in B2B, which is attribution. Whether you are chasing pipeline goals, justifying your marketing budget, or aligning with sales, attribution has become both a necessity and a frustration. With us are three marketing leaders who've been each tackled this from different angles. So let's start with some introductions. Peter, would you like to start?
Hey, Joaquin. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Peter Bach, and I've been managing different digital marketing channels at RingCentral for a better part of the last decade. And seeing the company scale up from about 100 million to 2.5 billion. So saw a lot of the challenges that come with that kind of growth.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. Jill, welcome.
Hi, my name is Jill Baumgardner. I work for Curriculum Associates based in the Boston area. We are an educational curriculum software company, and we serve approximately 14 million students in the U.S. I am the marketing performance manager, so I am elbow deep in Google Analytics, Salesforce, in a huge tech stack, but anything to do with marketing performance and analytics is usually falling on my plate.
Thank you so much, Jill. And Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm Ryan McIntyre. I work for Dext. We're a leading bookkeeping automation platform using AI before it was cool to help accountants, bookkeepers, and small businesses across the world. I am the director of digital marketing, and I look after our website, our SEO, paid media, and a bunch of other digital channels here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brian. Well, thank you so much for those great introductions. So let's start with the first question, and it's about what makes attribution so difficult right now in your experience. Are the challenges mostly technical, organizational, or cultural?
I can go first. I would say it's, for us, mostly technical, although I think those other parts do have a piece in it, but by and large, it's due to our fragmented data sources that really operate in silos. And we're slowly trying to complete the steps to bring it all together. So, for example, we have all of these advertising channels like Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, Bing. I'm sure this is a very common problem, but all of these platforms work in their own little buckets, and we are in the process of trying to put everything into a data lake so that we can have everything all in one centralized location. But up until we get that done, there's still that challenge of, hey, how do we pull all of these different things together? Everything is named differently depending on what channel it's in. Nothing's connected to our CRM quite yet. So how are we going to determine how our marketing is impacting leads specifically? So we can get things like vanity metrics, we can get impressions, clicks, form conversions, but they want to know how it's impacting pipeline, hence this conversation of attribution. So the big challenge we have there is simply technical. We have this huge tech stack, and we don't yet have something that's pulling everything together.
And is it only that the data is in different formats, or is just that these platforms don't give you enough data that you can put in your CRM?
I think it's a little of both, but mostly the former. Mostly it's just that everything is disconnected, named differently. The platforms themselves individually mostly give us the data that we would like to see, but not always the case. As an example, people really like to be able to see what the ad looks like, like an ad preview, the copy, the creative. And with Facebook, they don't give you like a link or something to export or an image link. You have to go to their Facebook library to get it. So that's not really straightforward on how we would do that. Our dream is to be able to pull up the campaign, pull up all of the ads, and then see how much each ad is actually attributing to our pipeline.
Yeah. What about the rest?
Yeah, I completely agree with Jill that there's definitely technical issues. I also think that I think attribution is becoming a bigger challenge over time because of the expectations of it. I think if you look back 50 years ago, when we didn't really have digital attribution, you'd slap up a billboard or you'd send out a flyer and you'd see if you had growth off the back of it after a reasonable period of time. The expectations are considerably more intense these days, especially when you're connected with your finance function, which as marketers we absolutely should be, but they want to know very specific ROI and very specific channels and audience groupings and campaigns and ad types. And I think one of the biggest challenges with attribution, especially with B2B, is that doesn't really exist. If I'm on Facebook and I see an ad for a t-shirt that's $5, I might buy it. And then you're going to have a one-to-one relationship between activity and result and revenue. And that's fine. But B2B marketing is considerably more complex. And depending on what source you look at, it might be anywhere from 50 touch points, 100 touch points. I saw some data from Google recently that was saying it's 90 touch points on average. It's impossible to say with any real confidence, this touch point that happened a year ago contributes X%, and then this touch point that happened 6 months after that contributed X%. And you can look at a first touch attribution model, a last touch attribution model, a U shape, a W shape, a linear, whatever you want. It's not ever going to fully capture the complexity of that user journey. And so I think sometimes as marketers, attribution can be a bit of we can kind of get stuck chasing our tails trying to figure out exactly what is performing. For me, ironically enough, what has the most successful with attribution is actually going back to that sort of billboard style advertising and being like, right, we know what we spent here, we know what we can account for in terms of seasonality and in terms of different levels of activity. We know that there's let's say a 1 month lag for this audience cohort because of the sales cycle. We know there's a 3 month lag for this cohort, and then we run like a correlation coefficient. So in a way, it goes back to that old saying of, I know that 50% of my marketing works, but I can't tell you exactly which 50%. I think it's that. So I sort of swing back and forth between wanting ridiculous, huge amounts of complex data and realizing that even with all of this incredible data, it doesn't really tell you what's going on. I mean, if Peter sent me a link on WhatsApp right now to a product and I bought it, we can't tell what the first touch is, right? If it comes from WhatsApp, that's hidden. My journey is hidden. So what do we do about attribution? We know this kind of stuff is increasing. We know ad blockers are increasing. We know that privacy policies are becoming more and more sophisticated. So I think that there's absolutely a technical issue, but I also think just that the landscape has changed so dramatically and expectations around the level of granularity we can deliver have changed so much. But I'd be interested to hear what Jill and Peter think about that as well.
Yeah, no, I think you both are spot on. To your point, Ryan, the buyer journey is so complex nowadays. We're looking at so many different sources. You're doing so much research, and you're not necessarily clicking on each thing. But maybe you saw an ad or you saw that billboard, but you didn't click on it. Now it makes it look like that ad wasn't worth anything. Meanwhile, that might be the reason why you went to the website and ended up on a certain landing page, which, to Jill's point, the technical ability to track and stitch all of those data points together is lagging behind the complexity of the customer journey. That's just making it really difficult to justify some of that top of the funnel kind of spend. Ryan, funny to hear you say we should go back to the billboard. It's amazing. Digital marketing always had that trackability, and that's one of the things that made it, easy to figure out. I saw this person clicked on this ad, they bought the product, we should invest more in this ad. But nowadays that's become so muddled just because it's difficult unless you're tying something directly to the pipeline or the revenue. You don't really know if it's working or not. That definitely leads to an over-indexing into last touch kind of attribution where, okay, we know the person bought the product after seeing this. We should do more of this.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's a really interesting challenge because if you take search ads, Google search ads as an example, like you say, Peter, last touch, they're going to look fantastic because people are already aware of your brand. Probably they may have seen you on social, they may have been to an event, some content syndication, whatever. If they click on that ad, you say, well, yeah, Google's ROI is fantastic because here's how much I'm spending and here's how much I'm getting out. But it just completely ignores everything else that happens before that point. We've experimented with first touch and last touch and linear and all sorts of stuff here. And the other thing that's interesting is regardless of whether or not if you're doing first touch, you have the decay issue, right? If your first touch was a year ago, should we still count that first touch? What about the gaps between touches? If your first touch was 6 months before the second touch, but then you had a bunch of other touches all happen in a week, does first touch still count? So regardless of what attribution methodology you pick, you're missing 99% of the interactions really. And there are some really cool tools like Hockey Stack and Dream Data that can stitch all of this together. But I think the challenge remains that if you're trying to communicate to your CFO or your CEO or whatever, the performance of an individual ad and an individual campaign that's running on Facebook, that is an incredibly difficult conversation, because I don't think it's possible to really say with any true confidence how much that's contributing to something. A lot of people, like you say, Peter, it's impression based. They might not even remember seeing it. It might be entirely subliminal. How do we track that? So this is why, well, obviously I would never advocate for like spend some money 1 month and see what happens the next and then rely on that as an attribution method. But to your point, Peter, I think it's important to know that even with the best attribution in the world, if growth isn't happening, there's an issue, right? So the most important thing at a foundational level is like you've got some activity and you need to have some uplift at the end. Figuring out what's driving it is important in the middle, but that's not the goal of marketers. The goal is to drive growth and to drive MQLs and to drive revenue and to drive brand awareness and all this important stuff. It's not necessarily to pinpoint the individual percentage contribution of a single ad.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to layer on your point about difficult conversations, I think because the attribution world is so muddied, you end up justifying and defending your spend a lot. And that really takes away from our job as marketers to just make improvements and optimizations to campaigns. I know I, for one, spend far too much time defending and justifying spend when I would have preferred to focus on, but how can we improve the sales process? How can we improve the customer journey? How can we remove friction? How can we add tools that make it easier for our sales folks? I think the whole attribution leads to a whole lot of time misspent when you consider how much justification we need to do in order to justify the spend that, which granted, executive leadership is always going to be skeptical of spend, and as they should be, but at the same time, too much time and effort spent on that instead of making improvements is a miss, I think.
I have a question. If being granular is not an option, like tracking like how this ad is performing and presenting that to your CFO is not an option, then what do you track? Is it impressions to accounts? Is it brand awareness? Like, how do you communicate attribution to your team, to the rest of the organization? I mean, not to the marketing team.
I guess one way to think about this, Rand Fishkin did a great post along these lines about a week ago, that you would never look at the product and say like, well, how much time have we spent on like the position of this button? Should this button be like a few pixels over here, or should it be down here? Or maybe the hex value of that is like a few points off. Like maybe the color needs to be slightly dark. No, you want to know like, is the product performing? Are people interacting with my product? Are they sticking with the product? Are they using the most important features? You care less about like individual button clicks and individual menu interactions. You might sometimes, but generally speaking, you're selling a product. I think what we're doing is the same thing, right? Like if I'm running a campaign, I want the campaign to succeed. And absolutely I can, if I'm running 8 or 10 different variations of an ad on LinkedIn, I want to know which version of the ad text is driving the most engagement and the most clicks and all that kind of stuff, and we can adjust bids against that. Fine. But I think it's more important to focus on, like Peter was saying, it has to align to commercial impact. And this is a bit of a blunt force object, but one of the ways that I've tested this in a couple of different organizations is turning off entire channels. And then you see very, very quickly the impact that something is having. So if you turn off paid search entirely, just kill it. Don't just turn off 1 or 2 campaigns. Don't just turn off 1 or 2 keywords. Turn it off entirely. As a marketer, there's 2 outcomes, and both of them are good. The first is that nothing happens, and your sales continue, and your revenue remains unchanged. And you can say to your CFO, look, how much money I've just saved the business. We can now reinvest this in something new. That's a victory. The second is sales plummet. And you can say, well, we know exactly why. It's because we turned off paid search. And you can systematically do this with a bunch of different channels or different audiences or whatever it happens to be. I think that's the quickest and easiest way of demonstrating not granular attribution, but the impact of marketing activity. And it's also better to do that than to have it done to you. Have the CFO come and say, look, we're stripping the budget because this isn't performing. If you do it proactively, it looks like you've done this you have done this strategically to see whether or not it's actually driving impact. So I think while we can obviously get into the weeds of bidding strategy and individual ads and measuring them against different audiences, and to be clear, we do all of this at Dext. We test a bunch of different audience types and ad techs and formats and all of this kind of stuff. But it really only matters if we're having a commercial impact. If all of this if we weren't actually driving an impact, no one's going to care about ad variant A versus ad variant B. If the revenue's not growing, the CFO and the CEO and the CMO don't care about that. So I think that's the thing that we need to focus on is like, is the business growing for a start? That's the first thing to pay attention to. And then, the other thing, sorry, I realize I'm hogging a bit of time here, but the last thing that has worked for us is, again, running correlation coefficient. We've established a really clear relationship between impressions, let's say, and revenue growth. So we've done the maths. We can see that's a thing. Now, that doesn't tell me necessarily which individual ad is working, but it gives me an indication of formats. So formats that prioritize impressions are great. We know that LinkedIn doesn't want people clicking ads because they go off LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn makes less money because it's showing less ads, right? We know ad platforms don't want people clicking, so that makes sense for us. Impressions are good. So that gives us an idea of what to go after as a metric. So yeah, I think the more simple we get, the more effective this stuff becomes, personally.
Yeah, it's really difficult to isolate all the variables. If you think about this as an experiment or, a linear regression where you come up with a correlation like this, and I say all the time at Curriculum Associates, we're talking about correlation, not causation, but people tend to want to know the cause anyway. But even if we do come up with a correlation, a challenge is that, someone will say, well, we also did this event at this exact same time, and sales also had this initiative at the exact same time. I love that idea of turning things off to see what happens, because we have done that, but it was not our choice. But, they would say spend less in this channel, and then they'd say, well, how come leads are down, and like, well, it's because we're spending less, and it's possibly because we're spending less in these channels, but we still don't have that causal effect because it's so hard to isolate those variables. But I also think people are afraid to turn things off too, to see what happens, because then if leads are down, then they're like, well, why'd you turn it off? There's always that risk of, some kind of negative outcome that you don't want to have to explain yourself.
And Jill, at the beginning, you mentioned that you were trying to pull different information from different platforms. For example, the creatives from Facebook. Is that because you wanted to get to that granularity and prove that to the rest of the organization? How was that experience?
Yes, our marketing department and really our company is a pretty visual company. So there are a lot of people who are invested in the imagery and the branding that we're putting out there, and what types of messaging are working and what is not. Not just marketing, but everybody wants to be aware of the ads that we're putting out. What are they saying? What do they look like? So that, for example, if somebody on the sales team is talking to a customer, they want to make sure that whatever they're saying is aligning with what our ads are saying and whether or not it's effective or not. So we're trying to kind of have this dynamic with sales where we're really collaborating and working together, being aligned on the branding and the messaging so that it's not disconnected. So by providing things like, here's what the ads look like and here's how they're possibly impacting sales, it's giving both teams more confidence to move forward with those messages.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But also I'm thinking about what you mentioned, Ryan, about campaign performance versus the overall results of your company. And I think it could be a bit risky, maybe mixing both things. Like, this is how a campaign is performing. And you can see, yes, this ad is performing very well. But then when you want to go and mix that with how much pipeline are you generating from a specific asset, I think that could be a bit of a risk. But I totally get the point of Jill, that you want to be aligned with sales, that actually you're running this campaign, these are the activities. But I think it gets messy when you want to mix like how individual things are performing versus how the company is performing.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
the tricky part of attribution.
I think maybe the approach that I have is absolutely not going to be applicable to every business, but we're very big believers in the 95 rule. We know that at any given point, only 5% of our TAM are in active buying mindset. And obviously this is going to apply to most of B2B, right? They're either already locked into a contract, maybe their purchase happens at a particular time of the year. My last role was selling investment bank training. Oh, my light's just gone off. So it was very, very seasonal. And now I'm waving my arms around trying to get this light to go back on. No,
don't worry, it's fine, I think.
Oh, there we go. You fixed it, Joaquin. Thank you. But if you assume that your buyers are only going to buy your product, if only 5% of your TAM are in an active buying mindset, focusing on that 5% doesn't make sense, right? You should focus on the 95%. It's like a haircut. If I just had my haircut yesterday and I see the best ad in the world, well, I'm not gonna go and get a haircut because I've just had one. If I get the same ad the next day, well, no, I've just had a haircut. I'm not going to go and get one. Day 3, day 4, day 5, whatever. By the time I get to day 30, if I've been consistently exposed to, you know, to different messages about this amazing hairdresser, this barber that lives nearby, maybe I am going to decide to go at that point. And so our focus is on like trying to be on the day one list. I want everyone to know our brand. I want everyone to know what we do. I want everyone to associate our brand with a solution to their problems, but I don't expect them to buy it right now. And so the idea of like this individual ad driving this individual outcome, that does happen when we have lead gen ads, fill out a form, download a thing. Sure. But I still don't know what they've done up until that point. They might have been to an event 6 months ago. They might have done a Google search 3 months ago. I still don't know. So I can say, yes, this ad drove this outcome, but that kind of ignores this whole 95-5 thing. So what we've seen, interestingly enough, is as we've invested more budget and more effort and more creative into proper brand awareness stuff, other really important metrics have gone up. Our organic traffic has gone up. Our organic leads have gone up. Branded search volumes have gone up. We're getting more impressions for branded search queries, which we can view through Google Search Console, for instance. So these are not immediate commercial metrics necessarily, but the hypothesis is that the more brand awareness you have, the more people are aware of you. You're on their day one list, and then they seek you out when they are in the buying mindset. At that point, they're no longer doing research. They've already heard of you. They already know that you're the right solution. And again, proving that on like a hyper granular click by click level doesn't work. So I think, again, maybe not suitable to all types of business, but I think I would wager that this is sort of the direction that we're going to move in as an industry, because as privacy policies and cookies and all of this kind of stuff becomes more prevalent, it's just going to be harder and harder to track people in that messy middle.
Yeah. What about you, Peter? You mentioned you had a great experience looking at a company growing really fast. How attribution was in the conversations while the company was growing, and the importance of repeating success and avoiding failure. Tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, certainly we didn't have the opportunity to shut off any channels. Ryan, I would have loved that, but sales would have been furious. When your targets are very aggressive, that's simply not an option. But I think, when there is such tremendous growth, it papers over, the ability to get so granular about the attribution, because everything is working and lots of revenue is coming in. So for a long time, it really wasn't an issue. Growth, spend in every channel was growing, and they were all evolving and getting better. And it was something we didn't need to pay too much attention to. And then as soon as that growth slowed down, however, all of a sudden it comes to the forefront of where should we be making these cuts, and the technical limitations of not having a more holistic view definitely led to more over-indexing in those bottom of the funnel channels like Google Ads or affiliates, because they were easily tracked. But it's something that you have the luxury of ignoring when your revenue is growing 34% year over year for 6 years, and we didn't worry so much about the attribution. As soon as that growth slows down, it definitely becomes a huge issue, and all of a sudden, you need to defend, just like Ryan said, those earlier awareness channels where someone's not in the market for your product yet. They just got a haircut, and it's difficult to justify showing that person an ad to an executive team when they see, but that person didn't click on the ad. Why are we serving them? And I think that's the push and pull between demand generation and lead generation, and that's what.
Yeah, and this is a question to all of you. If you had a clean slate, like new team, new technology, what would your approach to attribution look like? What's your one piece of advice to a team starting from scratch?
I think you do kind of need to look at each individual channel differently. And if you compare your top of the funnel channels against those last touch channels, they'll never win. You'll never say we should invest more in paid social advertising and less on search engine marketing. And I think that's a little unfair to paid social. They're creating that brand awareness that's leading to that person searching in Google. which I think is why we're all clamoring for the kind of technical solution that'll stitch that journey together. But I think, and this is a difficult sell, but you kind of do need to have different North Star metrics for each channel based on where they are in the funnel. You should be looking at maybe a cost per revenue for some of your channels, but for other ones, you simply can't. No one's going to see your ad for the first time on LinkedIn and turn around and buy your product the next day. They're probably going to drop into another channel and it'll look like that LinkedIn ad was a waste of time, which I think, creates the wrong kind of investment mix and channel mix if you kind of judge all of the channels the same.
Yeah, I think the solution to attribution is being able to read minds is what it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, we can't read anyone's mind. An ad could appear on a screen and it could have influence and we have no idea. But I would say that for somebody who's starting to look into this is that, phases are okay. That's what we're doing. We're starting with a phase 1 where we're working with an even distribution model, which, obviously we'd rather have an algorithmic or some kind of weighted model personally. As we develop that model, at least we're at a place where we can give some kind of estimate. And we repeatedly say that this is just a guess. It's not gospel. Based on this model, this is how we think we're influencing revenue. In my case, it's been better than nothing. And actually, if the person who's asking you, whether they're from finance or sales or wherever, even just giving them an estimate at our company has been enough. Like, people appreciate just having some kind of direction to go in, some kind of answer. I think it's important to have a good relationship with those who work in IT at your company. If you have an analytics team or somebody who's directly working with a data lake, I think that could be a very good relationship to start if you haven't already, because so much of this is relying on your technical capabilities and your data hygiene. So those are 2 pieces of advice that I would give it's okay to start in phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, etc. And then build a relationship with somebody who understands data and understands the technology.
Those are both such fantastic answers. I want to build on both of them a little bit. I think to Peter's point, if you're comparing the ROI of Facebook ad to the ROI of a Google search ad, you're going to say, well, let's just put all of our money in Google search. But in so many cases, overall, you're going to make less money doing that. Your ROI will be worse. So I think if I had like a single piece of advice, it would be, while channel by channel attribution is important, our role as marketers, I think, is bigger than just optimizing a channel. It's growing revenue. And sometimes you need to look at the performance of your marketing activity as a whole, rather than this ad, this text, this individual page, this individual campaign. And so I think a really good way to do that is using like a blended CAC model, where overall we've spent this much in this month, and here's how much we're getting at the end. And like I said, you can do like a lag model depending on how long your sales cycle is, and then sort of measure that month on month, year on year, and then looking back over what kind of activity you've been running at each of these points. Now, that's far from perfectly scientific, but again, if your CAC improves and your ROI goes up month to month, your CFO is not going to care that much about what individual ad each month is making that difference. Now, if it goes the other way, maybe they will. But again, the ultimate goal, I think, is make the marketing work as a whole, rather than try and get hyper fixated on like one individual channel. And so I think that's just an awareness thing, just knowing that to Peter's point, individual channels need to be treated differently. And to Jill's point, I think there's a big communication play there as well. I think it's really important when you're talking with your CFO and your finance team to use finance language. They don't really care about pipeline velocity, this, and MALs, that. They care about like, how much actual money have we got? And MQL is a variable metric. It's like Schrodinger's cat. It's simultaneously money and not money, right? Until that a decision is made, we don't add anything to the balance sheet. So I think talking in that language is really, really important. And if we are talking marketing metrics, as Peter was saying, like, look, we are going to spend this much on Facebook, and the ROI is not going to look as pretty as it does for Google search, but there's a very deliberate reason that we're doing that, and here's how this plays into our overall marketing mix. So we're trying to make this whole thing work. It's kind of like, if I'm eating a burger, I'm not really thinking about it as like 2 slices of tomato, a slice of lettuce, a slice of cheese, some ground beef, some onion, whatever. I'm thinking of it as a burger. And I think that's, if I was to give one piece of advice, I would try and think of marketing in that sense, is that you have this whole thing that we're doing, your website, your brand awareness, your email, all of this stuff is kind of contributing in some way, especially with B2B marketing when it takes a bajillion touch points to influence someone.
Well, thank you so much, Jill, Peter, and Ryan for joining us today. Attribution might not be solvable overnight, but these conversations help move the needle towards more effective and honest marketing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share it. That help us reach more marketers tackling the same challenges. Until next time, thank you so much.